We have discussed hyperactivity of the pituitary gland, that is gigantism, acromegaly, Cushing's disease, and hyperprolactinemia. In today's class, we will be dealing with hypoactivity of anterior pituitary gland, that is hypopituitarism, also called as hypopituitarism. What are the clinical features, etiology, diagnosis, and how you manage all these things we'll see in this class. Before going to that, just a short note on some familial pituitary tumor syndromes. As in last class, we have seen the acromegaly, Cushing's disease, they are isolated elevation of growth hormones or isolated elevation of ACTH levels because of the adenoma and all. But there are some conditions, some familial conditions where multiple endocrine glands are involved and their hypersecretion is seen. Some of those conditions, just develop all of those conditions here. This is very important actually. Can be a 2 marks question or more important for your NEET exam actually. It can be your entrance exam bits. Just I'll give a short note on it, no much description. So most common familial pituitary tumor syndrome is MEN1, that is multiple endocrine neoplasia 1, and the gene mutated is MEN1, and it is seen on chromosome 11q. All these variables are important, which is the gene mutated, what is a chromosome number, and what are the clinical features. They can be they'll give multiple choice questions, which are all the components of MEN1. They'll give hyperparathyroidism, they'll give hypo. Like that, they can give they can jumble options and they can give they can ask multiple questions. So this table is very important. So MEN1, the gene mutated is MEN1, that is called as menin protein, and the chromosome involved is 11q. Clinical features of MEN1 syndrome are: it contains hyperparathyroidism, parathyroid is involved, pancreatic neuroendocrine tumors, pancreas is involved, and pituitary adenomas. 40%. Most common in MEN1, most common which is involved is pituitary adenoma. That is around 40%. So 3 P's: one, pituitary involvement; second is parathyroid involvement; third is pancreatic. These 3 are involved. These are the most commonly involved organs. After that, foregut carcinoids, the adrenal adenomas, and skin lesions are also seen in MEN1. These 6 are very important. First, primary, most common is pituitary adenoma, which consists 40%. Next is parathyroidism, hyperparathyroidism. Next is pancreatic neuroendocrine tumors. This is about MEN1. Other tumors are MEN4, that is multiple endocrine neoplasia 4, and the gene mutated in this is CDKNIP, which is on chromosome 12p. And the components of this one is hyperparathyroidism, pituitary adenoma, and other reproductive tumors will be more, where germinomas, testicular cancers, all those things. So hyperparathyroidism and pituitary adenomas are a component of MEN4. Here, your pancreatic are not seen. Next important syndrome is Carney complex. And the gene mutated here is PRKAR1A, which is seen on chromosome 17q. And the most commonly involved organ is again pituitary, consists of pituitary hyperplasia, and it can also have pituitary adenomas. Other features include atrial myxomas, schwannomas, adrenal hyperplasia, and Lenti genes. Next syndrome is familial pituitary adenoma. Gene mutated here is AIP, seen on chromosome 11q. Clinical features are acromegaly or gigantism. So AIP most commonly involves only the growth hormones. So there is only acromegaly in here. There are no other components. Here actually, if you see pituitary adenomas, 40% are there. In these adenomas, it can be prolactin, it can be growth hormone, it can be many things. But here it will be only acromegaly. If you go in particular in MEN1 pituitary adenoma, which is most common, is again prolactin. Prolactinoma is most common, not required for you. If you remember this, is more than enough. Just memory part, you need to just revise, keep revising. So now to the topic of today's hypopituitarism. Hypopituitarism is basically a syndrome of, it's a clinical syndrome with all the anterior pituitary hormone deficiencies. That is also called as panhypopituitarism. It is basically results from disorders involving the pituitary gland or hypothalamus or surrounding structures. I have shown in anatomy where there is cella turcica in which pituitary is seen. Any abnormal growth in either sella turcica or in the hypothalamus or in any surrounding structures can cause hypopituitarism due to compression. So coming to etiology, it can be divided into some subheadings. So most common being developmental structural defects, structural or developmental defects causing hypopituitarism. These are nothing but structural defects of either hypothalamus or pituitary during the embryonic stage. What are they? If you go into the transcription factor defects, there are certain there's TIP, TIP. Some transcription factors are there in the development of pituitary hormones. If those transcription factors are deficient, then hormone synthesis won't occur, causing hypopituitarism. Just remember some transcription factor defects are involved in etiology of hypopituitarism: pituitary dysplasia or aplasia, congenital central nervous system masses or encephalocyte, primary empty cella. I'll be telling about empty cella in later slides, and congenital hypothalamic disorders. These are some congenital conditions where there is hypopituitarism seen. Second category is traumatic causes that can be due to either surgical resection, iatrogenic. So to surgical resection, if your pituitary is removed, can cause hypopituitarism. Radiation damage, cranial radiation due to because of some other tumors can cause pituitary shrinkage and cause hypopituitarism, and some head injuries causing cellular turcica, bone sphenoid bone fractures causing cellular turcica, ischemic infarctions, etc. So this is under traumatic. Traumatic is mainly surgical resection and radiation. Next is neoplastic, that is tumors. I told you already, tumors of either hypothalamus or pituitary or surrounding structures around cellular turcica. Anything can cause hypopituitarism by just compression of pituitary gland. So just to name those tumors, it can be most common being pituitary adenoma, wherein the gland itself, the pituitary enlarges and these cancerous cells enlarge in size and they compress all the functional cells. So there is no net hormone synthesis occurs, so that leads to hypopituitarism. Other paracellular masses like germinoma, ependymoma, glioma, Radke cyst, meningioma, etc. can also cause compression leading to hypopituitarism. Other tumors like craniopharyngioma, hypothalamic tumors like hypothalamic hematoma, gangliocytoma, pituitary metastasis. Primary tumor can be lung or breast, where there is metastasis in the pituitary can cause hypopituitarism, and in some conditions, lymphoma and leukemias can also lead to hypopituitarism. These are all the neoplastic tumorous conditions. Next is inflammatory or infiltrative causes. Means as suggested by the name, there is something infiltrating the pituitary, because of which there is no hormone synthesis. No hormone synthesis won't occur in the pituitary. So what is infiltrating this? It can be again divided into two types: primary hypophysitis, secondary hypophysitis. As you know by many other names, primary hypophysitis, there is no underlying disorder seen. The most common cause of primary hypophysitis mostly will be idiopathic, or sometimes some autoimmune etiologies might be there. Due to some unknown reason, there is lymphocytic infiltration or granulocytes infiltration or xanthomatous infiltration of the pituitary, causing hypophysitis. So just know that primary hypophysitis underlying cause is not known, it's idiopathic, and mostly studies have shown that it has autoimmune etiology. It can be either 2-3 types: lymphocytic hypophysitis, granulomatous, and xanthomatous. These three can infiltrate the pituitary and cause hypopituitarism. Next is secondary hypophysitis, where there is underlying cause, some primary disease is there. As a part of the disease or as a paraneoplastic manifestation of the disease, infiltration of the pituitary can occur, again causing hypopituitarism. What are those conditions which are associated with secondary hypophysitis? Is most common being sarcoidosis. Next are histiocytosis, vaginous granulomatosis, Takayama disease, hemochromatosis. All these conditions can have secondary hypophysitis. This is about infiltrative causes. Next are vascular causes. Vascular causes means any alteration of blood supply to pituitary can cause pituitary infarction and then hypopituitarism. One of those causes are pituitary apoplexy. I'll tell you what is pituitary apoplexy in the next slides. Next vascular causes are sickle cell disease. As you know, in the sickle cell, you might be learning this in hematology. There will be sickling of the cells, so they'll be having sickle cell crisis will occur. So because of this, there is vaso-occlusive crisis. All the sickle cells get occluded on the blood vessels, and the blood supply will to the organs will be hindered, so that hereditary necrosis will occur in this. Other vascular causes are arteritis, some aneurysms, and diabetes. In this instance, diabetes also shown to have hypopituitarism because of vascular etiology. Next is infections. Some infections can cause hypopituitarism, like fungal infections like histoplasmosis, aspergillosis, parasitic infections like toxoplasmosis, tuberculosis, viral infections like CMV, and pneumocystis carinii. All these infections can cause hypopituitarism. Next are some miscellaneous causes or functional causes where there is no structural damage not there, but the functions of the hormones, release of hormones is not occurring because of causes like nutritional causes or caloric restriction. The patient is having malnutrition. The patient is not consuming enough amount of nutrients. Then the hormone synthesis won't occur. In some conditions like critical illness, critically ill patients where they are admitted to ICU because of acute illnesses, chronic renal failure or CLD, there is suppression of hypothalamic pituitary axis in these patients because of the critical illness, and their hypopituitarism is seen. And some drugs like anabolic steroids, estrogen, dopamine, and GnRH agonists administration can also cause hypopituitarism. So this is about etiology of hypopituitarism. Just remember the main headings, and then you can just shortlist the other causes. First is developmental causes, traumatic causes, neoplastic causes, infiltrative causes, vascular causes, and infections. So infections and miscellaneous causes. This is about etiology. Now coming to clinical features, I told you any mass lesion of the nearby cellular turcica, either pituitary or hypothalamus or any other surrounding mass, can cause hypopituitarism. So, on a whole, what are the clinical features of any mass lesion? All mass lesions cause similar clinical features. What are those? They can result in headache, they can result in visual disturbances, and rarely they can cause personality changes, temporal lobe epilepsy, and CSF rhinorrhea. All the same, because mass lesions compresses the pituitary and they can cause raised ICT symptoms, and if the mass lesion is secreting some hormones, and those picture of hormonal excess can also be seen. Hormonal excess, hormonal deficiency can also be seen. This is about a picture, sagittal section of the head showing pituitary mass lesion. So this is the mass lesion, it's compressing all the pituitary structures and surrounding organs also, surrounding structures also. So this is about features of as a whole of any mass lesion. Now coming to in particular to the features of particular hormone deficiency. When there is growth hormone deficiency, it leads to a condition called dwarfism. And these patients have reduced energy or vitality. They have reduced muscle mass and strength, increased central adiposity, decreased sweating, and impaired thermogenesis, and reduced bone mineral density. These are all the features of dwarfism, that is growth hormone deficiency. A short note on some condition called Laron dwarfism, which is a rare condition. In this, it is basically a genetic disorder. It is also called as growth hormone insensitivity. The basic problem in Laron dwarfism is the growth hormone receptors in the liver are abnormal or mutated because of some genetic alterations and mutations. The growth hormone receptors in the liver are mutated, so they doesn't respond to your normal growth hormone levels in the blood. So because of which the net action of growth hormone deficiency is seen. But as such, the growth hormone levels in the body are normal. So, but since the receptors are a problem, growth hormone deficiency will be there. In these causes, there is growth hormone deficiency. Dwarfism, there is growth hormone levels are low. But in Laron dwarfism, is a particular type, growth hormone levels will be high actually. But since the receptors are at problem, clinical features of dwarfism are seen. So in Laron dwarfism, they doesn't depend on amount of growth hormone secretion. Hormones can't stimulate because hormones can't stimulate the growth due to abnormal growth hormones secreted of receptors. So basically receptor hormone. So there is no point in giving growth hormone in these patients. You have to change the sensitivity. The growth hormone receptors have to be changed. This is about growth hormone deficiency. It is ACTH hormone deficiency, adrenocorticotropic hormone deficiency leads to fatigue, weakness, anorexia, weight loss, nausea, vomiting, some abdominal pain, hypoglycemia, circulatory collapse, loss of axillary or pubic hair in women. Circulatory collapse is an important point in ACTH hormone deficiency, because of which this is the hormone that has to be corrected first. If there is, I'll tell you in the later slides, if there is combined pituitary hormone deficiency, which hormone has to be corrected first is ACTH. ACTH has to be corrected first because the deficiency of which leads to circulatory collapse and hypoglycemia. ACTH is a hormone which is required for day-to-day activity, and patients can't survive without ACTH hormone. Next is gonadotropin deficiency. In men, gonadotropin deficiency leads to erectile dysfunction, reduced muscle mass, erythropoiesis, reduced energy and vitality. In women, it leads to oligomenorrhea and amenorrhea, dyspareunia. Combined symptoms include loss of libido, flushes, infertility, reduced bone mineral density, etc. Thyroid hormone deficiency leads to fatigue, apathy, cold intolerance, constipation, weight gain, and sometimes psychomotor retardation. Posterior pituitary hormone deficiency, that is antidiuretic hormone deficiency, leads to polyuria, polydipsia, and nocturia. Prolactin hormone deficiency leads to lactational failure. And in hypopituitarism, mortality rates are basically due to increased cardiovascular disease. Because of these deficiencies, their atherogenic profile will be altered, and more of atherogenesis will occur in their blood, and then cardiovascular diseases are more high in them, which are most common cause of mortality in them. And this is important. This can be a question for you. What is the order of hormone depletion in a compressed solution? So if there is mass lesion, it starts compressing the pituitary. So which cells are affected first? Which cells are affected last? Growth hormone is the one which is affected first. So growth hormone is very much pressure sensitive. It is affected first. So growth hormone deficiency occurs first whenever there is a mass lesion. Following is there is the FSH deficiency. Following is LHS. Following TSH, and last is ACTH. So ACTH is pressure insensitive, mostly insensitive, and is the last hormone to get affected in compressive lesions. This order is important. And I'll show you another order where which is related to radiologic damage. If you are giving radiotherapy, which hormone is affected first with radiotherapy, which hormone is affected last with radiotherapy is again a different scenario. This is regarding to compressive lesions. A short note on some conditions. A short note on some conditions. I already told you lymphocytic hypophysitis. So mostly we are dealing with this primary hypophysitis. Etiology mostly suspected is autoimmune etiology. They have lymphocytic infiltration of the pituitary gland. So with this lymphocytic infiltration, what are the clinical manifestations? What they'll so it is hypopituitarism. Clinical manifestations of same hypopituitarism will be seen. Symptoms of mass effect with headache, visual disturbance, all this can be seen. It is most commonly seen in women during postpartum period. In the postpartum period, it is most commonly seen. Reason clear what is the pathophysiology is not known. It's just an observation. So generally hypoprolactinemia is also seen because it's most commonly seen in postpartum period where postpartum has hypoprolactinemia. Hypoprolactinemia is also seen in these patients. And because of hypopituitarism, deficiency of one or more pituitary hormones can occur. And diagnosis by an MRI, It shows pituitary gland enlargement, infiltration causing enlargement, which looks more similar like pituitary adenoma only. Treatment. What is the treatment for lymphocytic hypophysitis? It is corticosteroids. It's basically inflammation, infiltrative inflammation. So corticosteroids are the mainstay of treatment of for this hypophysitis. If there is any hormonal deficiencies, then hormone replacement has to be done. This is a diagram showing lymphocytic hypophysitis. See, this is the pituitary gland where there is complete infiltration with lymphocytes. It is basically so because of which there is enlarged pituitary, causing hypopituitarism. Next is pituitary apoplexy. Pituitary apoplexy is nothing but hemorrhagic infarction of a pituitary adenoma or a tumor. There is already a pituitary adenoma or a pituitary tumor. Within the tumor, there is hemorrhagic infarction, that is bleeding within the tumor, which leading to pituitary apoplexy. And this is considered as a neurosurgical emergency. It is a neurosurgical emergency because the presenting symptoms, patient present with acute onset hypoglycemia, they have hypotension and then going to shock, hypovolemic shock, CNS hemorrhage, severe headache, they can have signs of meningismus, they can have visual changes, and they can have ophthalmoplegia. All these will be acute. Suddenly they'll have an infarction because of blood loss. All these symptoms are acutely seen. So immediately that has to be drained. That's why it's a neurosurgical emergency. What are the risk factors? Are all the patients with pituitary tumor they develop hemorrhagic infarction? No. Patients who are diabetics, chances of going into infarction are more. Patients receiving radiotherapy, radiation treatment, because with radiotherapy the blood vessels become fragile, chances of bleeding will be more. And patients on warfarin due to some other cardiovascular causes, some other deep vein thrombosis, thrombotic causes, if they are on warfarin, then chances of developing hemorrhagic infarction are more. And these symptoms I told you already, it's acute in onset. Symptoms may occur immediately or may develop over 1 to 2 days, maximum 1 to 2 days, or immediately they will develop. Diagnosis by CT or MRI. Treatment available to decompression. Surgical treatment is a treatment of choice, that is transspinal decompression has to be done immediately. If the symptoms are mild, patient doesn't have hypotension, so much of hypoglycemia is not there, then it can be treated with corticosteroids, conservatively with corticosteroids. But the main share of treatment is again surgical. The decompression, transspinal decompression. The diagram showing pituitary apoplexy. See, this is a pituitary gland. This is actually a tumor. Actually, tumor was there. Within the tumor, there is sudden blood loss causing hemorrhage into such an enlargement causing compression of all the structures. Next, a short note on Sheehan syndrome. It is basically an eponym. It is named after a British pathologist, Harold, who described specific association of this syndrome with postpartum hemorrhage. What happens in this Sheehan syndrome actually? In postpartum hemorrhage, because of the blood loss, acute blood loss, there will be ischemic pituitary necrosis of the pituitary gland, causing hypopituitarism. So basically, ischemic pituitary necrosis after substantial blood loss during childbirth in the postpartum period is called as Sheehan syndrome. It's not other hypotension or other blood loss causes. Only the postpartum cause of hypotension only is called as Sheehan syndrome. So this is about Sheehan syndrome, and it's basically recognized some days to weeks postpartum. Symptom, how they present. The most common presentation of Sheehan syndrome is lactational failure. They has to be remembered. In postpartum period, prolactin levels are high, so there will be lactation occurring. First symptom they will present with is lactation failure. They won't be producing breast milk, and lactation failure will occur. Then you have to suspect Sheehan syndrome. They can also develop secondary hypothyroidism, thyroid deficiency, and secondary adrenal insufficiency, causing lethargy, anorexia, weight loss. These symptoms can also be seen. One more thing is, though the pathophysiology is hemorrhage, like because of postpartum hemorrhage, blood loss, acute hypotension causing ischemia, but there is no correlation between severity of hemorrhage and symptoms. Because if you take an example, one patient has severe postpartum hemorrhage, there is no hard fast rule that these patients will go into Sheehan syndrome. These patients will have severe Sheehan syndrome. Those who have mild postpartum hemorrhage, mild bleeding, will not develop Sheehan syndrome. There is no correlation as such. There is no correlation between severity and symptoms, but it is an observation found. So, chances of developing Chern syndrome are more. That's it. Next is head trauma. I told you in the etiology, trauma is one important cause. This trauma can be due to a road traffic accidents, RTA causing cellular Tasca fractures, pituitary cross section, trauma-induced vasospasm, or any other bleeding causing ischemic infarction. All this comes under this category. Sometimes this can be due to your birth trauma. It can be birth trauma causing cranial hemorrhage, fetal asphyxia, breech delivery. During these cellular birth trauma can occur. These can also cause hypopituitarism. The most common cause, traumatic cause is iatrogenic neurosurgical trauma. I already told you, surgery is the most common cause of hypopituitarism. If you open the cranium for either hemorrhagic, if there is any hemorrhage, to open the hemorrhage, for any decompression to open the vein, it's very common to develop the patient should develop hypopituitarism. Most common symptom of this trauma-related hypopituitarism, most common symptoms what is mostly seen is transient or permanent diabetic insipidus is seen, and varying degrees of hyperlipidemia is also be seen. And this hypopituitarism, if there is any trauma, it won't develop immediately. It will be developing within a year. Within a year after the insult, developing slowly. So it's a chronic process, not an acute process. Next is radiation injury. Radiation causes atrophy of the pituitary gland along with damage to hypothalamic synthesis. Hypothalamus also causes damage, so there will be the hypothalamic hormones or pituitary hormones will not be synthesized or released, causing hypopituitarism. And what determines this level of hypopituitarism is your radiation dose exposure, how much dose you are giving, what is the time interval you are giving, and what is the distance of the pituitary from the central energy field, like from where you have inserted the probe of the radiation, what is the distance between them. These all determines the development of pituitary hormone deficits. This is important. What is the pattern of loss in radiation injury? Growth hormone is the first one to get lost, which is growth hormone is radio sensitive. Following is follicle stimulating hormone, following is LH, following is ACTH, and last is CS. Here there is a difference. For compressive lesions, ACTH is the last one to get involved. It is very much pressure insensitive. But for radiation, TSH is last to get involved. So just to remember, growth hormone is very much radio sensitive and pressure sensitive. ACTH is pressure insensitive. TSH is radio insensitive. Just remember these words. TSH is the one which is last to get involved in radiation injury. And if there is any hormone deficiency because of radiation, they have to go lifelong until the hormone supplementation has to be given lifelong. A short note on empty cellular syndrome. The left picture is the patient. It is a sagittal section and only the pituitary view of a normal patient, where you can see this is CSF and this is a pituitary stalk and this is the pituitary gland. This is cellular tarsica and pituitary gland is in here, and this is the anterior, is the posterior pituitary. Right side is the picture showing empty cellular syndrome, where the pituitary is not seen and the CSF enters the cella and the CSF and the entire cella is almost occupied by CSF. This is the pituitary stalk will be normal and there is only certain rim of tissue just seen on the just by the attachment to the bone. Some tissue of pituitary can be seen. This is called as empty cellular syndrome because the cella is empty. There is no pituitary in it. But hypopituitarism, though the pituitary gland is not seen, hypopituitarism is very less common in empty cellular syndrome, and they can have normal pituitary function. I told you there is only some amount of remnant pituitary tissue is seen attached to the bone. This tissue produces your normal hormones, and mostly 90% of the time the empty cellular syndrome patients have normal pituitary function, and hypopituitarism is very less commonly seen. And what are the causes? Why it develops? Primary empty cellular syndrome can develop as a consequence of congenital weakness of the diaphragm, the weakness of the diaphragm during embryonic stage, during development of pituitary. If this diaphragm is weak, then the CSF herniates and it compresses the pituitary and it does not allow the pituitary growth. That is primary cause. And secondary causes like pituitary masses, any pituitary mass or any pituitary tumor can undergo silent infarction with secondary development of partial or total empty cella by CSF failure. So any pituitary mass or tumor, they can undergo infarction as like in apoplexy, and slowly they shrink in size, and then it is completely filled by CSF. That can also be possible. Sometimes, rarely, pituitary adenomas may arise within the rim of the pituitary tissue, and these are not always seen on MRI. So in this rim, normally it will be producing normal hormone. Sometimes these cells can, one of these cells can transform into adenoma and produces excess hormone, causing hyperpituitarism. So in empty cellular syndrome, hyperpituitarism is also seen. But if you clinically, symptoms-wise, patient presents with hyperpituitarism symptoms like excess Cushing syndrome, can present with acromegaly, etc. But if you do an imaging, there will be empty cellular. So it is quite contradictory. If in imaging, that is not seen, but symptom-wise, hyperpituitarism symptoms are seen. Then you have to suspect this empty cellular syndrome with pituitary hyperpituitarism, where the rim of tissue can be hyperfunctioning. So this is about hypopituitarism and some conditions of hypopituitarism. How to diagnose hypopituitarism? We need to do thorough clinical examination, including visual field charting, and along with that, simultaneous measurements of your anterior pituitary hormone levels has to be checked. And if they are normal, sometimes provocative tests are also need to be done to know what is the result, what is the hormonal result, growth hormone result or STH result. What is result is nothing but sometimes your hormonal levels in the blood can be normal, but if you do a provocative test where you want to see the reserve of the pituitary, so blood levels are normal, but in the pituitary, growth hormone or STH levels may be subnormal. It's not functioning normally. So when you do a provocative test, this subnormality can be detected. And what are these provocative tests? I'll be dealing with the provocative tests separately for every hormone, and these are important. Just what is important, I'll tell you. Growth hormone. What is a test of choice or provocative test to know growth hormone deficiency is insulin tolerance test. This is important. This has to be written. Insulin tolerance test is the one provocative test for growth hormone deficiency. What you will do in this, you will give insulin, regular insulin, 0.05 to 0.15 units per kg IV you will give. But before giving, you will take a blood sample and measure glucose values and growth hormone levels in the blood. Just before giving insulin, half an hour after insulin, 60 minutes after insulin, 120 minutes after insulin. And then we will measure glucose and growth hormone levels. Normally, in normal patients, if you do insulin, there will be hypoglycemia. Because of hypoglycemia, growth hormone levels increase in the blood, so that glucose levels should increase. I told you growth hormone levels in the previous class. Acromegaly patients, growth hormone excess causes hyperglycemia, and they are more to develop diabetes. Actually, there is some pathophysiology. Growth hormones leads to hyperglycemia. So since there is hypoglycemia, our body detects hypoglycemia and increases growth hormone levels, and these growth hormone levels increases sugar level, causes hyperglycemia. So in normal patients, if you give insulin, growth hormone levels should increase, and that increase will be greater than 3 microgram per dl in normal patients. If the growth hormone levels after giving insulin are less than 3 microgram per dl, then there is growth hormone deficiency. Then it is confirmed that there is growth hormone deficiency. This is about insulin tolerance test. Insulin 0.05 to 0.5 units per kg IV is given, and then growth hormone levels are measured, and growth hormone levels less than 3 microgram per dl indicate growth hormone deficiency. This is what has to be remembered. There are some other tests are also done for growth hormone deficiency, which are like growth hormone reserve, GHRH test, where you do 1 microgram per kg IV, and same thing you measure growth hormone levels should increase. If it is less than 3, it is deficiency. Similarly, L-arginine test and L-DOPA test are also done. Values are same. Growth hormone levels should be greater than 3. If it is less than 3, it is deficiency. That is about growth hormone. Which has to be remembered here is these two. Insulin tolerance test is the first test has to be done. Next is GHRH test. These two are important. Prolactin TRH test is the provocative test for hypolactin deficiency, where you will give 200 to 500 microgram IV, and then you will measure prolactin levels. Prolactin levels normally should be greater than 2 microgram per liter after giving TRH, or there should be a 200% increase when compared to baseline value. If your baseline value is around 1, it should be more than 2. If your baseline value is around 0.5, it should be more than 1. 200% increase in baseline value should be there. If the baseline, if there is no 200% increase in baseline value, or if the value itself is less than 2, then prolactin deficiency is confirmed. That is your prolactin. Next is TSH. TSH deficiency. First, we will be confirming with your basal values. T3, T4 TSH values has to be measured, and if it is pituitary cause of thyroid deficiency, it's called as secondary hypoparathyroidism. There will be low free T3, free T4, and normal or low TSH can be seen. This is basic test, and provocative test is again TRS test, same like prolactin. 200 to 500 microgram IV is given, and TSH should increase by greater than 5 milliliters per liter in normal patients. If it is less than 5, this TSH deficiency. Next is ACTH. In ACTH, many tests are there, but what is important is again insulin tolerance test. Same like how do you for growth hormone, hypoglycemia releases increase ACTH levels. So same mechanism, insulin is given and then measured, and then cortisol has to be measured in this. Cortisol normally it will be greater than 20 microgram per dl, but if the cortisol values are less than 20 after insulin giving insulin, then it is ACTH deficiency. That is insulin tolerance test. Next important test is CRH test. How you are given for TRH, and how you are done GHRH. CRH has to be there. It's cortisol releasing hormone has to be given at the dose of 1 microgram per kg IV at morning in the 8 a.m. and then blood samples has to be taken at these timings, and then ACTH levels has to be measured. ACTH levels increases by 2 to 4 times when CRH is given. If such an increase is not seen, then it is ACTH deficiency. Or else cortisol should be greater than 20. If it is less than 20, also it is ACTH deficiency. And one more test called co-syntropin test. This is important. Standard ACTH stimulation test, also called as co-syntropin test, where we do 0.25 mg of co-syntropin to the patient, and we will measure cortisol levels. Co-syntropin is nothing but artificial ACTH. It's nothing but artificial ACTH. If the cortisol again same thing, greater than 20 is normal. If it is less than 28 is abnormal. This is ACTH deficiency. These two are important: insulin tolerances, CRH test, and standard ACTH stimulation test, co-syntropin test. See, there are some other tests like miterapone test, low dose ACTH test. Low dose ACTH is much similar to ACTH, only the dose is increased. Here is 250 micrograms, it is 1 microgram. 3D ACTH, all these tests can also be done for ACTH as ACTH deficiency or ACTH provocative test. LH or FSH tests, provocative tests are first thing, basal levels of LSH, FSH, testosterone, estrogen has to be measured, and here LH and FSH levels will be low, and along with low testosterone, estrogen levels. Provocative test is GnRH test, that is gonadotropin releasing hormone test, which is given in dose of 100 microgram IV, and the LSH and FSH levels are measured. Normally, LHS levels should increase by 10 international units and FSH by 2 international units per liter normally. If such an increase is not seen, then it is indicative of growth gonadotropin deficiency. This is about individual hormones. But I told you hypopituitarism means there is combined hormone deficiency. All hormones are involved. So, what we will do? We will combine everything and we will do. Combined, that is combined anti-pituitary test will be done. That is nothing but growth hormone, releasing hormone 1 microgram per kg, CRH 1 microgram per kg, GnRH 100 micrograms, TRH 200 micrograms. All these things are given IV at a time, and then at these timings, like 15 minutes, 30 minutes, 16 minutes, we will be measuring individual hormones. Growth hormone, ACTH, LH, FSH, TSH, all you will be measuring. I told you already what are the readings and what is the minimum increase that should be there in normal patients. So this is about provocative test for hypopituitarism. Next, what is the treatment? Treatment is simple again. Hormone replacement therapy. Whatever the hormone is deficient, that has to be replaced, and this replacement should mimic physiological hormone production. How the normally in body hormones are not produced in a regular fashion. It's not like same dose all the time. When sometimes the high peak of hormone will be used, sometimes low hormone will be used. So that physiological hormone has to be matched. For example, glucocorticoid replacements change with change in human bodies. Whenever there is some acute illness, whenever the patients have some fever or any stressful event, if you are going for exams, if you are having under any stress, your body produces more ACTH and more cortisol levels in the blood. So acute stress requires more glucocorticoid replacement. So just short note on how do you view these hormones. In growth hormone deficiency, growth hormone has to be given, and human growth hormone 0.2 to 0.3 milligrams subcutaneous has to be given for 4 to 6 weeks continuously, and then you have to measure insulin growth IGF-1 levels and growth hormone levels has to be measured every 4 to 6 weeks. And if it is normal, maintain that. If it is abnormal, titrate the dose accordingly. What are the contraindications for growth hormones administration is malignancy. If the patient has malignancy, growth hormone can't be given. The patient has benign intracranial hypertension, growth hormone can't be given. And if the patient has any proliferative diabetic retinopathy, growth hormone administration can't be done. And these are the 3 contraindications. Side effects of growth hormone administration include headache, arthralgia, myalgia, fluid retention, etc. This is a algorithm showing your growth hormone deficiency management, how to manage. First, you need to go for clinical features, or any clinical features are present or not, what any pituitary pathologies are present, and you have to do provocative tests. And if the evoked growth hormone levels are less than 3 microampere, that there is confirmed growth hormone deficiency. Then we need to exclude contraindications like malignancy, benign intracranial hypertension. If contraindications are not there, then give growth hormone 0.1 to 0.3 milligram per day. And then after 4 to 6 weeks, check insulin growth factor levels after 1 month and titrate the growth hormone dose accordingly. Increase or decrease the dose based on the IGF-1 level. So basically, IGF-1 is the one which why I kept this slide is IGF-1 is the one which is used to monitor growth hormone deficiency. It's not growth hormone levels are not checked periodically. IGF-1 levels are checked. Next is TSH deficiency. Treatment of choice is thyroxine replacement. Mostly T4 will be given. T4 and T3 separately are available. Mostly T4 will be given. And monitoring is by T4 levels. TSH monitoring is unhelpful in this case because for TSH to get normalized it takes 2 to 3 months. So in the immediate period, TSH deficiency is monitored by T4 levels. And I told you already, ACTH deficiency is the one which has to be treated first in combined hormone deficiencies because it is the first which is important in life. Without that, patients can't survive. So before correcting TSH, we have to check for ACTH deficiency, and if any deficiency is there, first correct ACTH deficiency and then only start thyroxine replacement. And side effects of thyroxine administration are sometimes on long-term basis they can result in AF and they can cause reduce bone mineral density reduction, causing osteoporosis, etc. Next is ACTH deficiency. Most first hormone to be corrected in hypothyroidism. Doses are hydrocortisone given in dose of 15 to 30 milligram per day. BD, that is a preferred agent. Some orals or equivalent dose of steroids can also be used, like cortisone acetate or prednisone. And 2 to 3 fold increase in glucocorticoid dose is required whenever patient is in any stress, like any intercurrent illness or any surgery, any trauma is there. In those stress conditions, hydrocortisone levels has to be increased. Vasopressin deficiency. In mild diabetes insipidus, I will be telling about vasopressin. Vasopressin is basically ADH, antidiuretic hormone, which is post-pituitary hormone. I will be telling about this in later slides, next class. Just remember, in mild diabetes insipidus, where there is ADH deficiency, if the urine output is less than 4 liters per day, not very severe, just oral intake will be sufficient. But in severe forms, where the urine output is less than 4 liters, there is severe antidiuretic hormone deficiency. then desmopressin is indicated. Desmopressin either in intranasal form or oral form. Oral will be available in form in doses of 300 to 600 microgram OD has to be given for vasopressin deficiency. Gonadotropin deficiency in men, testosterone replacement has to be done, and it has beneficial effects on body composition, sexual functions, bone mineral density. Fractures can also be reduced. It also affects on mood and behavior. Treatment is contraindicated. That is, testosterone replacement is contraindicated in patients with prostate cancer and male breast cancer. In these conditions, these two conditions, testosterone can't be given because testosterone increases the incidence of prostate cancer versus the prognosis of prostate cancer. In women, estrogen replacement has to be done, and it relieves the symptoms of deficiency and is also bone productive. And this administration has to be done often given with cyclical progesterone. Progesterone, estrogen that cyclically has to be given. We will be dealing with more in your gynecology. So this is about hormone deficiencies and how do you correct that? What doses has to be given? Hypopituitarism, what are the causes of hypopituitarism, and provocative tests, how do you diagnose hypopituitarism, etc. Thank you.